I want to bring in now banker and scholar with a focus in financial and socio-economic inclusion and poverty eradication, Dr. Rotimi Nilola. He joins us from London. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
Yes, thank you very much, Marachi, for inviting me, and good evening, viewers.
Well, we're very happy to have you here, and I'm sure that you have been watching and observing, the recent movements with the tariffs and the Chinese president going all the way to Southeast Asia to Ghana support. President Trump waiting in the White House for that phone call from President Xi, although the president says he's not going to make that phone call eventually. But were the tariffs between the United States and countries around the world, were they really hurting the American economy and by extension tipping the balance on global trade?
All right. Okay. The tariff war between the U.S. and multiple countries, actually started with Mexico and Canada, and then from February, opened it up, to other countries, especially countries that the U.S. considers as those contributing to its trade deficit. All right, provided like 10% tariffs for all countries except a couple of countries. Give them higher tariffs. I was listening to your report before this meeting talking about Cambodia and Vietnam. Cambodia 49%, Vietnam 46%, as high as Nigeria 14%, EU 20%. All right, but now it's tending towards more between US and China. All right, now this has significant impact potential, not only for the US, for China, for top partners, top trading partners of the US, and actually across the world. All right. Now, what is the immediate impact? Coming to your question. And also, before I answer that question, let me just say also that when you look at a lot of commentaries and analysis of what is going on between the US and China and some of the other countries, on the face is tariff and trade, yes, but some of the commentary that you see is highlighting some other dimensions like geopolitical war. And when you talk about bullying and all that, geopolitical war, and sovereignty, national security issues. But I don't want to dwell on that. As you know, my interest is more of economic impact on the
Yeah, but the question really was, before the imposition of these new tariffs, was there a trade deficit between the US and any of these other countries? So much so that the US president really had to address the issue with the new tariffs.
Yes, indeed. In fact, that's exactly the question. There was or there is a trade deficit. Now, the US today has found itself in a situation where it has amassed a trade deficit of about $1.2 trillion. So essentially, the US has become a net importer nation, a net consumer nation. So you can imagine accumulating $1 trillion trade deficit every year for a number of years. So you will not be surprised why today America has about $24 trillion in foreign debt. So that's a very difficult position to be in. And you may not like the politics of the American government, but the numbers are there and the fundamental issues are there. And that is but the problem there is the impact. So what the administration, the US government is trying to do is trying to rebalance that situation and take America out of that deficit. Now, the approach is, the end game is, how do we either take out this deficit or how do we minimize this deficit? So this is the war that is going on. Now, but the problem there is there's collateral damage. There will be impact on the US, on China, and the rest of the world. Now, the immediate impact we have seen is meltdown in the stock market. Now, in the early part of April, you will see that there was a lot of panic in the stock market and a lot of sell-offs, all right? About $6 trillion of value, right, was taken out of the market. That's a substantial impact on America. And you would also, and that panic also was going into the bond market, and it was affecting some other stock markets around the world. Now, why is there a panic, and where is this impact on the stock market? Is because the worst fears that people have in the medium to long term is that American economy is going to go to recession. And if you've been following also, you will see that JP Morgan actually forecasts about 40% chance of American, not only American economy, but the global economy going to recession. Then they move it to 60% because of escalation. Now, they try to hold off a bit now because the US government has given a 90-day pause, right, on that action against all the countries. And even against China, they've removed some very sensitive products like electronic products, semiconductors out of it. So because of that, they are trying to moderate their forecast. But by and large, people see that if the US goes into full implementation of these tariffs, and China, for example, because today now, the US has said 145% tariff on Chinese exports into the US. Now, China has retaliated, right, by saying it's going to be 125% also on American exports into China. Now, if both of them don't find a compromise and they go ahead to implement it fully, this will have massive impact on America, both to American consumers and American manufacturers. And how is this the case? It's the case because through the years, a lot of major consumer products in America actually come from outside of America. Because of the situation the American government is highlighting, where it has become cheaper to bring products to the US. So cheaper to do that than actually producing in the US. So you find a lot of products like computers, phones are coming from outside of the US. You will see, for example, even worse, a country like Vietnam manufactures 50% of Nike wears, most of them going to the US. 39% of Adidas wears being manufactured in Vietnam, a lot of people going to the US. So what's going to happen is that if China implements 25% retaliatory tariff, now these tariffs are like tax. They're going to be added. They will be passed on to consumers in America. That would be a lot for America. That would be immediate inflation becoming into America.
Yes, so that is the reality, Doctor. Sorry, that is the reality on the ground. The impact
Yes.
it will have on the economy, and how U.S. consumers will have to bear, the difference, in the tariffs that these countries have to pay for bringing in goods into the U.S. But looking in hindsight, Trump's tariffs are already changing global order. Was this an inevitable position for the U.S., having to announce those tariffs and directing its anger, I would say, at China, blaming them for the way the U.S. economy has turned out, all of the deficits, trade deficits that already exist? Can America really blame all these other countries for the situation it is in now, which is the reason why it has to impose these tariffs, according to Trump?
Okay, so the question first is this inevitable? Looking at it, I would say it's inevitable. It's a question of if, not when. Because if the American economy is in a situation now where there is trade deficit of 1.2 trillion, all right, and out of that, 300 billion of that deficit is coming from China, all right. So China is exporting about 450 billion into the US, right? So it's like America is paying China for 450 billion, and China is only buying 140 billion from America. So there's a deficit of about 300 billion. Now, many other countries are like this. So America is in that situation where if it continues that way, because what is happening is that if you have that trade deficit, you have to finance it. So, and that's why America is also now the largest debtor nation in the world. So if you continue that way, America will continue to amass debt, and it will get to a point where if you take your personal level, at the personal level, if you are spending more than you are more than you are earning. So something has to give at some point. Now, a lot of people may have a problem with the way it's being approached. All right. So the jury is out. What is the best way to approach this or how to manage this? All right. But the fact is that the numbers are on the table, and a lot of people, commentators, even within America, understand that this is a challenge for America. Not today, because if you go back in the 60s and 1970s, America used to have trade surplus, meaning that America used to be a net producer nation, not a net consumer nation. So from the late 70s into 80s, it started into deficit and it's been growing, right? And now it's at 1.2 trillion. So if you continue that way, it's going to go to a point where it may become very unmanageable. So something has to be done. Now, so that is the point where it is. But the issue is every country has their own argument. Now, it may not be accurate to blame China for the situation 100% because if you look at the situation, the American and Chinese economies are intertwined. It's been like a symbiotic. Okay, so Chinese exports into the US are cheaper, right? So because of several factors, the weaker currency of the Chinese currency is weaker than the dollar. So it makes their exports to be cheaper, which is a deliberate strategy because they want to have an export-led economy. So deliberately, they keep their currency not too strong, right? Which makes sense if you want to drive exports. So and then they also have labor, massive labor. So we have cheap labor as well. And then because of these tariffs, because what the US is saying is that many countries are giving high tariffs. They are taxing American more than America is taxing them. All right. So all of this together has made Chinese products, iPhone, phones, computers, wares, and many other products to be affordable for the American customer. So China and other countries will say, listen, we have helped American consumers to be able to afford this product. So it's good for your consumers. And if you also look at major tech firms like Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, and so many other major tech firms in the US, many of their components for their products is coming from China, right? And then there are rare earth metals that America does not have, right? Which comes into the US to help electric vehicles and all that. So Chinese economy has been supporting America, to a very large extent in that manner, all right? But the flip side also is America is now saying, listen, this has happened, but it has also, it's like we are subsidizing you, all right, to be able to do this. So, so each of them have their own arguments. All right. So, so this is where it's coming from. Now, the question is.
So, Doctor, before you go any further, I wanted us to talk about, Africa, and I've heard many analysts say that this is the perfect opportunity for African countries to restart their economies, choose their partners wisely from a position of strength. Why aren't we hearing African leaders themselves pushing this narrative? There doesn't seem to be any sense of urgency on the continent with regards to the trade tariffs.
Yeah, right. I mean, your question is a very good question, and there are lessons not only for Africa, for the rest of the world. Everybody's watching. There are major lessons, and the international trade and the global order for trade will not remain the same again. A lot of lessons are coming out, and every country will have to take lessons and begin to shape and go back to drawing board and begin to come up with how the kind of strategy for the international trade. But coming back home, like you said, Africa, we also have to take major lessons from this. What are the lessons? The first lesson that you will see, starting from when the aid, right, the US aid and all that was cut off, to what is now going on. The first lesson is that nobody's coming to save you. Okay? So nobody's coming to develop you. You have to develop, you have to save yourself. Other countries of the world can come and help you, can come and support you. But you see, the primary responsibility for you is to be able to develop your economy for the benefit of your people. This is coming out a lot from what is going on, right? So the era where you are developing your economic strategy or your strategy as a country based on aid, grants, and support from around the world and all that, that era is gone. That's what you're seeing now. Because what America is doing, you may not like the politics of the current president of America, but what he's saying is American first. So he's not going to be subsidizing the whole world, right, at the expense of America. Now, you may not like that in terms of the way it's been approached and all that, but you cannot say that it does not make sense for an African country, or any country at all, to say, I want to prioritize my people. It does not mean you are fighting other countries. It doesn't mean that you are going to be unfair to other countries, but it means that I have to prioritize my country, I have to prioritize my people. Because listen, if you don't do that, nobody's going to do that for you. That's what is going on. All right. So American government is saying,
Thank you.
if you charge me 10%, I charge you 10%. All right.
Right.
So okay.
Yeah, Doctor, thank you so much. There's a lot to unpack here. With the U.S. tariffs, always gets guests going. People have opinions and thoughts about this, but thank you for breaking this down for us. It really doesn't mean that America is an enemy to nations. They're only just trying to offset, their deficits. Thank you again for joining us on the program, Dr. Rotimi Niyilola.
Thank you so much.